This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Enter the world of sports the way you want with EA Sports College Football 26. Whether you rise through the ranks as a coach or chase greatness from high school recruit to Heisman, build your legacy and wear your colors with pride. Buy College Football 26 now at go.ea.com/MVP-bundle and bring glory home today. EA Sports College Football 26 is rated E for everyone. Includes in-game purchases, including random items.
The number one selling product of its kind with over 20 years of research and innovation. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Got a car to sell but no time to waste? Hop on to Carvana.com to get a real offer for your car in seconds. All you have to do is enter your license plate, answer a few quick questions, and if you accept the offer, Carvana will pay you as soon as you hand the keys over. They even offer same-day pickup in many cities. Save your time, score some cash, and sell your car the convenient way to
Carvana.
Pickup times vary. Fees may apply.
Shopping is hard.
I can never find anything in my size.
I don't even know my size.
I buy my clothes the same place I buy my groceries.
There's a better way. Make it easy with Stitch Fix. Just share your size, style, budget, and done. Your personal stylist sends pieces picked just for you.
That was easy.
Stitch Fix. Online personal styling for everyone. Free shipping and returns. No subscription required. Get started today at stitchfix.com.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. Earn 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. And with a welcome offer of 150,000 points after you spend $20,000 on purchases on the card within your first 3 months of membership, your business can soar to new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at polestar.com.
If you went on a road trip and you didn't stop for a Big Mac or drop a crispy fry between the car seats or use your McDonald's bag as a placemat, then that wasn't a road trip. It was just a really long drive. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's.
Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 110,000 bonus miles for a limited time through July 16th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends 7/16/25.
Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts.
Christopher Morrison, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from San Francisco. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about 4 core dimensions of team interaction: communicating, processing, deciding, and executing. I love thinking about, talking about team dynamics. I think it's something we all experience, and in many cases, we all dread. I think back to university experiences and the dreaded team assignment.
The team project.
The team project. I think everyone has had that. And, maybe even the stress dream where you wake up with a cold sweat in the middle of the night and you have this team project, even 20 years after you're done with college and you still have those stress dreams. I don't know if people can relate to that, but I think that's a ubiquitous kind of like thing that most people don't love. Those types of team experiences, at least at college. I think once you get into the workplace, maybe, hopefully, you have more positive experiences. But the reality is, regardless of how you feel about team experiences, they're just deeply embedded into everything we do in the workplace. Some jobs more than others, but the world we live in is a collaborative world. It's a team-based world, and we need to figure out how to do it effectively. We need to learn how to be good collaborative partners as we work together. And we need to learn how to break down silos within organizations so we can really create and innovate and bring value to the market. So we're going to unpack this and talk about this together as we go throughout this conversation today. As we get started, I wanted to share Christopher's bio with everybody. Christopher Morrison is the co-founder and CEO of Team Dynamics, a pioneering platform designed to enhance modern team collaboration through advanced personality assessments. Under Christopher's leadership, Team Dynamics has emerged as a key tool for optimizing team dynamics and improving workplace efficiency. Before founding Team Dynamics, Christopher served as the chief operating officer at Doma, a fintech startup that he helped grow from a small 5-person pre-product company to an industry leader with over 2,000 employees and $550 million in revenue. I could go on. There's a lot of really cool stuff, Christopher, about your background. You've accomplished a whole lot, but I'm going to pause there. Is there anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context or by way of your company before we launch on into the broader conversation?
Yeah, my journey to Team Dynamics ties together a bunch of different threads from my experience. And so, maybe why don't I tell you a little bit about my journey, and in doing so, maybe share some of the lessons that led to Team Dynamics.
Awesome.
So if I wind the clock all the way back, I started my career at McKinsey, the management consultancy. McKinsey is a great leadership training ground. And one of the foundational lessons that I took from my time there is the power of a simple framework. Now, I'll acknowledge that McKinsey is like legendary for their frameworks to the point of it all, being a bit of a joke. It's it's kind of like how many McKinsey light bulbs or how many McKinsey frameworks does it take to change a light bulb? But I think that there's a reason for it. The world is complex and we need a simple way to make sense of it. And a good framework distills something that's complicated to its essential components and makes it actionable then as individuals, as humans. And, I think my time at McKinsey was also really my first exposure to the power of culture and how true that saying is, culture eats strategy for breakfast. What we would spend months working with our clients to craft the perfect strategy for XYZ, a new product, international expansion, what have you. But what ultimately separated the projects with real impact from the rest was the culture of the place. Like, could our clients actually take an idea and turn it into a reality? So, after 5 years at McKinsey, I had the opportunity, as you mentioned, to join a pre-revenue real estate technology startup out here in San Francisco called Doma as its founding chief operating officer. And as you mentioned, over the course of my 5 year run there, I took that organization from 5 of us squatting in an investor's office over the Sweet Green Salad Shop in San Francisco to a little over $500 million in revenue, 2,000 associates, and an IPO on the New York Stock Exchange. And leading through that rapid growth really emphasized to me the truth of the saying, you can't manage what you can't measure. This is also a bit of like business dogma, jargon, what have you. But it's true, figuring out the right things to measure, getting an accurate read on them and staying focused on them is so important to getting an organization aligned and accountable for moving towards the same goal. And, as you were sort of talking about in your introduction, I also learned how different it felt to lead a team that's really working, like a team that's really humming, from one that's just okay. It's the difference between feeling like anything is possible and feeling like you're stuck in neutral, always putting out little fires, never really moving the ball forward. And so, after I took my company public, I stepped back from that role. I took about 6 months to reflect on what I'd learned, the challenges I'd had, and what I might do about them. And, this was sort of the first time in my career where I had a bit of the luxury of spending more time with other founders and execs kind of outside of, my organizational context. And, people's circumstances are unique. Every leader's circumstances are unique. This person might be closing a round of funding. This one might be launching a new product. But on the short list of every single person, every single leader's biggest challenges and opportunities are their people. Who's on the team for sure, but just as importantly, how they're working. And I came to realize that one of the glaringly obvious holes or missing pieces in the leader's toolkit is a simple and robust framework to measure and therefore help the team manage their teamwork. Basically, applying the simplicity of a McKinsey framework to help leaders define and manage that fuzzy, but you know it when you see it thing, which is teamwork. And when I say teamwork, by the way, I don't mean the flow of tasks. There's tons of project management techniques, software tools for that, et cetera. But I mean the interactions within and between teams. And that's really what team dynamics is. It's an easy to use tool to assess and categorize your team's behaviors along the most important dimensions of teamwork, which you mentioned and we'll get into in more detail. Super simple. Everybody on a team takes a proprietary survey instrument. Our system analyzes their responses along with those of their teammates, and we deliver back to them a quantitative assessment of how their team is working, as well as how each individual relates to their team, and a set of recommendations to improve both. And leaders find this really helpful for a couple of reasons. The first is it takes something that can seem pretty squishy, quote unquote, how we work, and it makes it concrete. Each team falls into one of 16 team types, and that makes it a whole lot easier to describe, discuss, and ultimately improve how your team is working. The second thing that people, find really helpful is when you deploy team dynamics across an entire organization. So not just in one team, but across, many teams, it establishes basically a shared language that you can use as a really valuable shorthand when welcoming someone new to a team, working cross-functionally, or resolving inter-team conflicts. For example, if you know that the product marketing team is super organized in how they share information and approach projects, but maybe the engineering team is more ad hoc or agile in both, as a manager, that allows you to devise strategies up front to accommodate both teams' needs and ways of working, and then also better adjust if and when there's friction between these teams. And then the last thing, that people find really helpful about team dynamics is, as a tool for coaching and developing individuals. We don't just analyze a team's behaviors. We also analyze how each individual relates to those behaviors. Do they naturally fit with the way the team works? Are they in tension with certain dimensions of how the team is functioning? And knowing what those points of tension and alignment are helps leaders better coach their teams to improve individual performance and also to come up with strategies to manage stress and boost satisfaction when working with their teams.
Yeah, well, all that's great. And you highlighted, I mean, a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of issues that teams often are dealing with. But also, I think you highlighted the dynamic nature of teams within organizations,
Yeah.
that they're constantly changing.
Yeah.
Very rarely, I mean, it does happen, but very rarely do you have the case where you have like one team of people where the same, 4 or 5, whatever,
Yeah.
10 people are just constantly working together indefinitely, years on end together, and when that does happen, you have a chance for cohesion to really happen and they can just like bond and work together and whatever. But
Yeah.
what usually happens is you have a constant readjustment, and you have collaborative teams, cross-functional teams, you have special project teams, you have like all these different things where people from different parts of the organization are constantly getting thrown together
That's
on
exactly
different
right.
teams, right? That's usually what's happening.
Yeah.
And so and at any given point in time, one individual employee might be thrown onto like 4 or 5 different teams for different
That's right.
projects, right? And so you need to learn how to not just, I mean, it's almost too simplistic to say, I need to figure out how I can work with this one team at
Yeah.
work, right?
Yeah.
I need to figure out how I can relate to and work with a lot of different teams at work.
Yeah.
And that's why, having tools like this can be super, super helpful, because it helps you to, like you said, have a common language. It helps you to unpack all these different aspects that sometimes I think we just kind of overlook. We don't really think about. We take for granted, perhaps. And what ends up happening, in my experience, is people will chalk up, things that they do wrong, to good intentions.
Yeah.
But they'll chalk up to what other people do wrong as, they're jerks. It's nefarious. They're,
Right.
Trying to undermine me. They're trying to screw me over, whatever, like bad intentions, which is usually not the case. Like usually it's just different styles. It's different perspectives. So if you can help people to understand that and how to relate to each other, it can just lead to a better opportunity for people to have quicker cohesion.
Yeah, absolutely. Our research suggests that team behavior is influenced by a number of different factors. You rattled off a couple of them. The manager of the team, who plays a role, but actually, maybe not as big a role as many people think. It does matter for setting the tone of the team. The makeup of the team matters, who's on it. The organizational context matters, what the culture and norms are of the broader organization that the team, works in, what the team is working on, and then a bit of a dose of randomness also comes into play. And, as you mentioned, that means that, every team in an organization is going to have its own, unique characteristics, but it also means any given team, its personality isn't going to be permanent over, it's going to shift over time as things like team composition evolve, as organizational contexts evolve. And, team personality, has been proven by social scientists to be hugely impactful in both team performance and the job satisfaction of team members. Top performing leadership teams are 200% likelier to generate above average results. People are 5 times more productive when working in a high performing team, than when they're in an average one. The statistics go on and on. And having a toolkit to monitor changes over time, but also just to give each individual a bit of a cheat sheet or user guide or instruction manual for how a given team works goes such a long way towards accelerating the onboarding of that team member, getting them up to speed on what it takes to sort of slot in and collaborate effectively with the team. But it can also, just by labeling the various dimensions of a team, take a lot of the heat out of some of the points of friction, tension, or conflict that can emerge when you're working in a team. And so I think at its best, when you use a tool like Team Dynamics, what you're doing is you're equipping everybody with the ability to understand, label, and action sort of the different ways of working that their team has. And I think that goes a long way towards improving performance, productivity, satisfaction, and ultimately how rewarding working in a given team can be.
Yeah. And the rewarding piece, I love that you focus on, because it doesn't need to be something that we dread. like those college team projects, that often people did dread. It can really be rewarding. It can be fulfilling. It can be something that you look forward to. It can be invigorating and engaging. I mean, it could be something that you really get excited about when it's done well. It could be the best part of your workday, your work week.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I think we can all think back to and point to, moments in our careers when, we were on an outstanding team. And, not only did it feel like we could get anything done, but also made the day-to-day experience of, getting up and coming to work, that much better. And I think, the more we can offer leaders, managers, as well as individuals on teams, the tools they need to create that environment, I think the more successful organizations will be.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's dive in and talk. We've already kind of started to cover it, but let's talk more explicitly about these 4 core dimensions.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Communicating, processing, deciding, and executing.
Yeah.
So your tool helps with that, right?
Yeah.
Let's dive in. Like,
how what does your tool
help? Yeah, what are they? How does your tool help with that? So let's start with communicating.
Yeah. So when we started exploring the idea of what would ultimately become team dynamics, we began with a meta study on the social science that's been done over the last 50 years or so on the topic of teamwork. And one of the foundational insights of that research is that teams have behavioral patterns that can't be explained just by aggregating or analyzing the traits of their team members. It sounds like a mouthful, but basically what it means is teams have personalities that are different from the personalities of the people on the teams. And as I mentioned, team personality is hugely impactful for determining team performance and the job satisfaction of team members. So, after we did that research, we set out to define the elements of a team's personality. And while every team, of course, has its own somewhat unique characteristics, we identified 4 main dimensions of team interactions, with teams showing 1 of 2 opposing behaviors along each dimension. And by the way, for anyone listening or watching who wants a sneak preview of your team dynamics that will cost you absolutely nothing, as I go through, sort of describing each of these dimensions, I want you to ask yourself 2 questions. The first is, which of these behaviors sounds more like my team? That'll give you a bit of a sneak preview of your team dynamics. And then as an individual, which way of working feels more natural to me, which might be the same as, your team's behaviors, or you might discover that you're in tension with some of how your team's ways of working, and knowing that can be super, super helpful. So just keep those 2 questions in mind as we go through the 4 core dimensions of team dynamics. So the first dimension is communicating. This is how teams share information, and teams are either ordered or informal. An ordered team has defined processes and forums for sharing information. So think about internal documentation like wikis, recurring meetings with defined agendas, Slack or Microsoft Team channels that are organized by topic, et cetera, et cetera. In contrast, an informal team surfaces and shares information much more organically. So think about this as one-off conversations, phone calls, water cooler chats, lightweight, maybe even non-existent meeting agendas, and information and expertise that's much more likely to live in people's heads versus in written formalized documentation. The second dimension is processing. And this is how teams turn raw information into actionable insights. And teams are either logical or relational. A logical team is one that relies on tons of data and rigorous analysis when interpreting information. The argument that carries the day on a logical team tends to be the one that's most rigorously researched and supported by facts. And there's a general skepticism of intuition or gut feel. But on the other end of the spectrum, a relational team is one that relies on specific trusted individuals to tell the team what's going on and what matters when they're looking at information. So these are teams that have a habit of socializing analysis ahead of decision points. So they'll run that analysis by key people for their input and buy-in. And there's a lot of emphasis on a relational team on the value of expertise, organizational context, and relationship capital. On a relational team, it's better to have the team's respect than it is to necessarily always be quote unquote right. The third dimension is deciding, and this is how teams align on what they're going to do. Teams are either authoritative or concordant. You can think about an authoritative team as your classic top-down team. So these are teams that look to leaders to act decisively and set the team's direction. Those decisions are typically made by team leaders. Sometimes on an authoritative team, you'll have a small group of team members who are sort of delegated authority by the leader. But decisions are typically made without a ton of input from the broader group. And team leaders tend to provide pretty clear direction and explicit instructions for tasks and projects, and communication generally flows from the top. The opposite of this is a concordant team. You can think about this as a consensus-driven decision-making process. So these are teams which collect input from everyone on the team before making a decision. They consider a bunch of different viewpoints. Deliberation is the name of the game on a concordant team. Transparency about a decision-making process is key to getting buy-in and getting things done. And then the last dimension of team dynamics is executing. And this is how teams plan and work toward their goals. And teams along this dimension are either deliberate or spontaneous. So a deliberate team, that's one that creates really detailed implementation plans that they then closely follow, diligently maintain. When something unexpected happens to a deliberate team, their first instinct is to go back to that original project plan and figure out, hey, why didn't we anticipate this? But on the other hand, a spontaneous team is one that's really responsive to new information. They build lightweight plans if they build them at all. And they're quick to toss them aside in the face of new information or changing circumstances. And they're really quick to move from a decision to action. A lot of plans don't even, or a lot of projects don't even have a plan defined, and they are much more likely to opt to quote unquote figure it out as they go along. So taken together, these four dimensions capture really the entire life cycle of modern teamwork. Communicating and processing those first two dimensions, that's all about how teams gather and interpret information. Deciding and executing the third and fourth dimensions get at the core of how teams turn insights into action. And then that feeds right back into the information gathering and interpretation stage.
I only have you for a little bit more time, and I'll have to let you get on with your busy day.
Yeah.
Based on your experience working with organizations, what would you say would perhaps be the most important thing for people to keep in mind related to the processing, deciding, and executing elements, maybe in the next 3 minutes, if you were to highlight maybe 1 to 2 points each?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think I would emphasize like a couple of different things. I think the first thing is there are no behaviors in the team dynamics framework that are inherently better or worse than others. Now, there might be situations where a certain team type is better suited for the circumstance, but it's important to remember that any team can be successful. But what's essential is understanding your team's type, leveraging its natural tendencies and strengths, and being mindful of where your blind spots are, as well as when you need to flex outside your team's comfort zone. And so, when you know what your team's type is, it's like having an instruction manual for your team. This is how we work, and this is, as a leader, therefore, how I need to lead it and how I, fit in effectively. I think the second thing I would say is it's just really helpful when you're leading an organization to align on a language for what teamwork means to your organization. Maybe it's using team dynamics, maybe there's another framework that you come up with on your own, but having that shared definition, I guess, for what teamwork means really is a prerequisite for anything you want to do to improve your team's ways of working. The third thing I'd say is, I just hark back to that phrase I said at the beginning of our conversation where, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Use your definition to measure how your organization is performing, and use it to build a bit of an action plan to improve team communication and collaboration. And then I think the final thing I would say is, as you alluded to, teams are constantly forming and reforming. Yeah. People are constantly changing teams. The organizational contexts are constantly evolving. And so I think it's really important to emphasize flexibility as a core leadership competency. There's no single best way for a team to work together. It's a function of who's on the team, what the team's tasked with, broad organizational, context, all that. And I think, what we've seen is that high-performing teams, they know how they prefer to work. So they understand what their team dynamics are. They understand how they as individuals relate to those team dynamics and where they might, feel stressed or feel sort of in sync with the team's ways of working as an individual. But the other thing that high-performing teams know is when and how to flex outside their comfort zone. And I think this is where leaders can play a really key role in, sort of setting this tone, setting the team direction, galvanizing the team around flexing outside of its comfort zone. And so if we can, equip them with the tools and knowledge, they need, they can instill that flexibility in their teams. And that makes teams a whole lot more resilient to, changing challenges, different organizational stages, et cetera. Basically the reality of what, teamwork means in 2024.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Reality of teams today versus the reality of teams 20 years ago. It's ever evolving, and it will continue to evolve. And that's something we have to continue to pay attention to.
Yes.
Well, Christopher, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. We've only scratched the surface. There's so much more that could be discussed, but I do need to let you get on with your busy day. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, cool. So best place to learn more about Team Dynamics is on our website. That's www.teamdynamics.io. We've got a ton of information about the Team Dynamics framework. For example, we've got a free rapid result that'll give you a directional sense for your Team Dynamics in just a minute or two. We've got a lot of resources you can download that'll help you, build a better team. And you can also email us at hello@teamdynamics.io or drop me a line, Christopher@teamdynamics.io. And I would just say, take advantage of, this opportunity to bring some structure, bring some clarity, and have a conversation with your team about your team's ways of working. Just opening that dialogue up, just starting to develop, a shared language can go a really long way towards, establishing better trust, among the team, and also just the space to do the work needed to improve the way your team is working. I promise it'll be among the highest value, highest leverage activities you take as a manager or a leader.
Thank you so much, Christopher. It's just been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Christopher and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.